Good evening. I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily for Thursday, January 5th. And we begin tonight with the latest developments of the war in Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin has issued an order for a 36-hour ceasefire. He is asking the military to hold off on attacks on Ukraine this weekend for the Russian Orthodox Christmas holiday. Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu says the move was made based on the fact that a large number of citizens professing Orthodoxy live in the combat areas. The Russians are now calling on the Ukrainian side to declare a ceasefire and to give people the opportunity to attend services on Orthodox Christmas Eve, as well as on the day of the Nativity of Christ. All right, well, meanwhile, airline passengers leaving mainland China, Hong Kong, and Macau will now have to provide evidence of a negative COVID-19 test when they enter Canada starting today. The Canadian government announced that travelers from those regions would need a negative test administered within 48 hours of their departure, as cases continue to soar out of control in China. Other countries, including the United States and several European nations, imposed similar rules, despite protests from China. Parents across the country are seeing their childcare fees reduced by up to 50% on average. This is part of the federal government's early learning and childcare agreements. Lindsay McDonald is a coordinator with the Association of Early Childhood Educators Ontario, and she says that despite the drop, there is still a shortage of early childhood educators, which threatens the success of the National Child Care Program. According to the 2021 census, early childhood educators and assistants made an average of $26,760 a year. All right, turning to the Yukon now, which is offering $1,300 a year in dental benefits to eligible residents who don't have coverage under another plan. The move makes it one of the most comprehensive programs in the country. The program began on Wednesday and is expected to cover a variety of dental treatments for an estimated 8,000 people. It includes full coverage for preventative care, such as routine dental cleaning. NDP leader Kate White says she hopes that the program will be a step toward universal coverage. The Federal Justice Department says a year after Canada's ban on conversion therapy, it's not aware of anyone being criminally charged for offering the service. Conversion therapy is the practice of attempting to change someone's sexual orientation to heterosexual, or to change their gender expression to match the sex they were assigned at birth. LGBTQ+ advocates say that although the ban could act as a deterrent, the practice is still being offered in Canada. The family of a man who died after an altercation with guards at a Montreal jail while he was being unlawfully detained is demanding an inquiry. Niku Dandre Spring died after being fitted with a spit hood and pepper sprayed twice by jail guards. This was the day after he should have been released from the Bordeaux jail. The Red Coalition, a nonprofit organization assisting Mr. Spring's family, says it will file a complaint with the Quebec Ombudsman on the family's behalf. It also says it's asking the office to launch an investigation into systemic racism in the jail system. The Transportation Safety Board has released its findings of a train derailment in New Brunswick in 2021. It says high temperatures, exposure to direct sunlight, buildup of stress, and the worn-out tracks caused a buckling and it derailed 30 hopper cars loaded with potash on August 21st. It says potash from 27 of the 30 cars was spilled, but there was no fire and no one was injured. The board says there may be more of these derailments if railway tracks are not tested for how they behave as temperatures increase. The Toronto Regional Real Estate Board says December home sales amounted to almost half of those seen a year ago. The average selling price hit $1.05 million last month. Now, this is down by 9.2% compared with December 2021. The board says home sales in the final month of 2022 totaled 3,117. Now, that's down 48.2% compared with December 2021. All right, well, back on the East Coast, the annual curbside collection of spent Christmas trees starts this Monday on PEI. Island Waste Management issued a statement yesterday saying all unwanted trees should be placed by the curb by 7 a.m. Residents are being told that large trees must be cut in half and all trees should be free of snow or ice. The trees will be used to make compost, but residents also have the option of delivering their trees to goat farmers who have added their names to a list compiled by Island Waste. Forum Daily will be right back after the break. And when we return, we're going to be taking a look at the world of investing and the markets. We're going to be speaking with Brendan Caldwell, director of Caldwell Securities Limited. He's going to unpack the future outlook of Apple after some major changes. We'll have that story and more news from around the world up next, so stay with us. This new year comes with a lot of hope for investors. Hope for relief from interest rates, the rising cost of living, inflation, and a comeback for faltering investments. But what about hope for a better supply chain and global production? Well, most recently, tech giant Apple has been facing major criticism for its operations in China, and its shares are taking the hit. In November, Apple's iPhone factory in Zhengzhou, China, was clogged with violent protests. In fact, the protests at the factory, with as many as 300,000 workers, caught the attention of the world through online videos, where workers could be seen throwing items and pushing for their rights. Well, following this upheaval, Apple decided to begin shifting production to other Asian countries, and some say there may be something to learn from all of this. Well, joining us now to talk more about this is Brendan Caldwell, director at Caldwell Securities Limited. Brendan, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Thank you, Nima. Great to be here. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Now, when it comes to new things, you actually had quite a positive outlook back in March 2020 when the COVID-19 pandemic first came about. Now, your hope was that the global crisis would maybe usher in a new era of global cooperation and partnership. So where are we now when it comes to this, Brendan?
Well, I've got a lot of hope, Nima. I still have a lot of hope. I think just before Christmas, when I was talking to Nathaniel, I'd said that I really hoped there would be a ceasefire of some sort over Orthodox Christmas in Ukraine. While one side has made overtures around that, the Ukrainians, and understandably, aren't necessarily buying. But I really do hope for some sort of permanent peace in Ukraine. But even a Christmas peace would be a wonderful thing. In terms of the world as a whole, what I'd hoped was this global crisis, however it started, wherever it started, isn't the issue whence it's all over the world. It's about, I would hope, people coming together to fight it. That's not what's happened. People have gone, the trend has accelerated toward nationalism, toward regionalism. We've seen it even here in Canada. Even a few years ago, Alberta separatism wasn't actually a thing. Now it's openly being talked about, and never mind around the world where we've seen over the previous half century a greater degree of global cooperation as a result of trade. Now, nationalist protectionist barriers are coming up, and obviously, as we're seeing on the news every night, it's got even more aggressive than that.
From the sounds of it, we may be heading in the opposite direction, Brendan. Now, when it comes to Apple itself, we mentioned what's going on with Apple in our intro, and you actually spoke about what's going on with Apple to the media. So tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on what's going on with this company.
Yeah, I think that was our just before New Year's interview was, Apple, as Father Ray D'Souza in his column about a few days ago, a week ago, had pointed out, the symbol of a bite out of an apple reminds one of Genesis and the forbidden fruit on the tree. And as his National Post column pointed out, it's just a little bit too ubiquitous, a little bit too universal to see that apple symbol everywhere. It almost has, for some, apocalyptic overtones. But leaving all that aside, Apple's been in tough in China, where one of its suppliers, Apple doesn't make actually any of its own stuff, or very little of its own stuff. One of its suppliers, Foxconn, had, what did you say, 300,000 people in a factory? I mean, that's the population of Quebec City or Hamilton, who have been, because of the COVID restrictions, locked in there. It's been a very difficult situation. Now, Apple has taken some hits over that, but one is left questioning why one is dealing with and cooperating to such a degree with the Chinese Communist Party at all. Much as I said about global cooperation, the barriers do seem to be going up, and the distinction between good and evil becoming a little bit more crisp.
Definitely something to consider, Brendan. Just about a minute left here, but is there anything that investors should take away from all of this, from this conversation we're having today?
Well, I said it was about hope. And I think from a market perspective, every time I chat with people, they say, oh, the recession, the recession, the recession. Yeah, it's going to be a different recession given how robust the employment market is, how well companies are doing. And as I pointed out, for the first time in my working career, it's been possible for companies to actually make money by raising prices rather than just cutting costs. I think that might actually end up being a good thing for everybody because cost cutting has led to, well, different sorts of practices that haven't been as helpful and maybe even contributed to some of what we're seeing in the world today. So as a sole means of making money, I don't think it's as good as perhaps companies that are delivering good and better products and are able to get those delivered, being able to raise their prices. So a lot of good may come to investors and the companies they invest in 2023.
Travel agents in Saskatchewan say Sunwing's cancellation of all flights from the Saskatoon and Regina airports for the month could short them thousands of dollars. Agents say the airline has told them that it won't protect their commissions. Citing extenuating circumstances, Sunwing announced last week that it was immediately canceling its operations through February 3rd at the two Saskatchewan airports. The airline says it will follow normal procedures with respect to travel agent commissions. John Gradek is lecturer and coordinator at McGill University's Aviation Management program, and he has called the Sunwing situation a debacle, which shows that the government needs to look at finding ways to ensure airlines can deliver on the schedules they promise to customers. Well, Mr. Gradek joins us now. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily. Looks like we're having an all too familiar conversation starting off the new year.
Yeah, this sounds like a broken record. You're right.
Definitely, sir. So can you unpack the magnitude of the Sunwing situation for our viewers?
Well, it is a fairly complicated situation. I think that what Sunwing sees itself in a situation today where they don't have the resources that they need to fly the schedule that they published. And I think that was also part of the problem they had during the Christmas issues that they had with respect to cancellations and delays. So this is an example of an organization that has put together a flight schedule that was much too ambitious for the resources that they had. I think Sunwing had a intention to bring in about 74 foreign workers, which are pilots. That was canceled in November. The schedule wasn't adjusted, and they end up with all kinds of problems over Christmas. And now, due to public pressure and government pressure, they're seeing the need to cut back their schedule, and they've picked on Saskatchewan as the lucky loser in terms of that reduction in schedule.
Lucky loser indeed, sir. Now, on top of all of this, you're saying that Canada's travel complaints process is broken. So can you tell us a little bit more about this process and what's wrong with it?
Well, I think I've been making this statement for a few months now in terms of looking at the APPRs, the passenger protection regulations, and the appeal process that's in place for individuals who've been denied compensation by the carriers. You have the ability to go to the CTA and file a complaint with the CTA, and you join 32,000 other Canadians in that lineup that the CTA has for adjudicating these complaints, which to me, I think the agency now has said 18 months at best to, in fact, deal with that volume, and the volume is increasing. So, 18 months is not acceptable. We need a new system, a new way of dealing with, adjudicating and fixing and investigating passenger complaints. We have to have some targets that are complaints resolution targets that are reasonable, that are efficient, that deal with making sure that the passengers' rights are dealt with quickly. And 18 months is not the right number.
Some
30
important
days
points,
is
some
yeah, and
important
30
points
days
to consider there, sir.
Yeah, and 30 days should be the right number. Within 30 days, the CTA should in fact adjudicate.
Definitely, Mr. Gradek. Just a little over a minute left here, but amid all of this chaos, we know the federal NDP is calling on the government to find ways to make the airline industry in Canada more competitive. So what are your thoughts on this, and is this possible or realistic at this time?
I think we're competitive enough as it is. I think the NDP is taking an interesting approach that by more carriers we'll get lower fares. Well, guess what? We've got lower fares. We've got services coming out of our yin yang on the transcontinental services. We don't need another carrier on a transcontinental. We've got 7 of them already. Prices are low, competition is there, and you're not going to entice anybody to fly into Saskatchewan or Northern Ontario or Western Newfoundland. They're going to want to go after those big markets, and there's enough carriers there already.
All right, a quick 45 seconds left here, but let's conclude with some broader perspective on this issue. So how do you see these flight cancellations and staffing issues in Canadian airports impacting the broader global travel sector?
Well, we know we've got a lousy reputation as it is today. So it's, August, September, Toronto was voted the worst airport in the world. And what's happened over Christmas, I think the Canadian airports have demonstrated to the world that Canadian airports are not doing very well in dealing with winter. Guess what? Winter happens every year. And so this year, somehow, some way, we haven't got the resources or the skill set or the experience needed to operate winter. Hopefully, they'll be getting the experience this next few months. And hopefully by next Christmas, we'll get our act together.
Lots to keep our eyes on. Mr. Gradek, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
My pleasure, Nima. Take care.
Take care. All right, we'll be right back. And after the break, we're going to take a look at the major news stories and headlines from around the world, of course. So stay tuned. Forum Daily will be back after a short break. Well, the pressure is mounting on Republican leader Kevin McCarthy. This to determine whether he can win enough of his party to become Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. Now, this comes after days of failing to win enough votes from them to become Speaker. Mr. McCarthy remains determined to persuade holdouts to end the stalemate that has blighted his party's new majority. After losing 8 rounds of voting, Mr. McCarthy is under growing pressure from both sides of the aisle to find the votes that he needs or step aside. This so that the House can open fully and get on with the business of governing. Looks like China continues to face the impact of a worsening COVID-19 outbreak. Patients, mostly older people, lay on stretchers in hallways or take oxygen while sitting in wheelchairs. This comes as a COVID-19 outbreak stretches public health resources in China's capital of Beijing. Officials with a hospital in the city's East End report it was packed with newly arrived patients. The crush of people seeking hospital care follows China's abandonment of its most severe pandemic restrictions last month. This was after nearly 3 years of lockdowns, travel bans, and school closures, which weighed heavily on the economy and prompted unusual street protests. The outbreak appears to have spread the fastest in densely populated cities first. Severe weather continues to impact the United States. Damaging winds and heavy rains from a powerful atmospheric river pounded California yesterday. It knocked out power to tens of thousands, causing flash flooding and contributing to the deaths of at least 2 people. As the huge storm barreled into the state yesterday, officials ordered evacuations in a high-risk coastal area. This is where mudslides killed 23 people in 2018. More than 180,000 homes and businesses were without power in California early this morning, according to poweroutage.us. Pakistani police say attackers ambushed a police van assigned to guard polio workers in the country's northwest, wounding 5 officers. No group claimed responsibility for the attack, but Islamic militants often target polio teams and police protecting them. This while falsely claiming the vaccination campaigns are a Western conspiracy to sterilize children. The latest anti-polio campaign started this week in northwestern Pakistan and is the first in 2023. A doctor says the death toll in a pair of suicide car bombings in Somalia early Wednesday has risen to at least 20. This includes 9 members of the same family. The doctor with the hospital in Mahas district told the Associated Press that more than 50 people were admitted for treatment. Police have said the attackers targeted a military facility. This was in a region at the heart of the government's offensive against al-Shabaab extremists. The attack occurred after the dawn prayer. Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for the attack. Greece's Coast Guard says one of its patrol boats has fired warning shots at a Turkish Coast Guard vessel that was trying to ram it in the eastern Aegean Sea. The Coast Guard said the shots were fired into the air. The incident comes as relations between Greece and Turkey, historic regional rivals and uneasy NATO allies, have been tenser than usual over the past 3 years. Germany's network regulator says a gas shortage is increasingly unlikely this winter. However, it is warning that it's still important to use the fuel sparingly. The Federal Network Agency said in its daily report on Thursday that it views the situation as less tight than at the beginning of the winter. It had described the situation as tight since Russia started reducing gas deliveries to Germany in June. The agency stressed that a deterioration of the situation still cannot be ruled out. Two American tech companies have announced the layoffs of a combined 26,000 employees. E-commerce giant Amazon says it will eliminate about 18,000 positions. This is the largest set of layoffs in the Seattle-based company's history. Business software maker Salesforce says it is reducing its workforce by 10%, affecting about 8,000 employees. Well, tens of thousands filled St. Peter's Square as Pope Francis honored his predecessor Benedict XVI. Pope Francis presided over a rare requiem mass for a dead pontiff by a living one following Pope Benedict's death on New Year's Eve at the age of 95. Pope Francis opened the service with a prayer and closed it by solemnly blessing the simple casket. Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin has shown what physicians treating him are calling remarkable improvement over the past 24 hours. The team announced the update 3 days after Mr. Hamlin went into cardiac arrest and had to be resuscitated on the field. The team said that while Mr. Hamlin is still critically ill, the 24-year-old has demonstrated that he appears to be neurologically intact. The team said Mr. Hamlin's lungs continue to heal. All right, I'm Nima Rajan. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time on Forum Daily News.